pathetic statement was about a meeting in Paris in December 2019. Macron, Merkel, Putin, Zelensky, which the Germans and the French convened to save the Minsk agreements. And there was a preparatory work which culminated in a draft document agreed by experts, by ministers of the four countries, and then presented to the presidents and chancellor. And it was, consensus. It was consensus, and it said that there would be disengagement at 3 areas on the line of contact immediately.
Something extraordinary has just happened. It is so shocking that many are still pinching themselves after hearing about it, wondering if it is true. But the drama has ignited a firestorm in British politics. Frankly, the world of politics just got a whole lot more dramatic. In a stunning display of verbal warfare, a Russian leader has taken a direct shot at UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on live television, no less. And this wasn't some polite diplomatic disagreement. This was a full-throttle, no-holds-barred, dagger straight to the heart kind of attack.
Thank you. It may be a great irony that a Remainer Prime Minister used Brexit freedoms as effectively as he did yesterday. Indeed, as number 10 briefed, we are now in a unique position compared to the rest of Europe, and yesterday was a triumph. I also applaud him making such positive words about President Trump and our relationship with America, even if nobody behind him agrees. But here's the key. President Zelensky has now accepted that he's going to sign the minerals agreement with America. And America's going to put in $100 billion or whatever it is, and thousands of Americans will be in Ukraine. Is that of itself enough of a security guarantee? No. Or does it mean that we need to send British troops? And if we do, given the size of our army, how many?
Starmer, who has been strutting around as the freshly crowned leader of Britain, thought he could waltz into the global arena, puff out his chest and bark a few orders. It was clear Russia was watching, listening, and had decided it was time to put him in his place. But what happened that triggered such international backlash on Starmer? And what did the Prime Minister do that deserved such a brutal takedown?
The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said he's willing to put British troops in Ukraine as peacekeepers after any deal.
It's unacceptable. British troops will be direct target for our missiles. You will get scoffings in return. That's it.
Enter Ian Popov, a Russian MP from Vladimir Putin's United Russia party. In an interview, he absolutely annihilated Starmer's stance in a way that left even seasoned political analysts picking their jaws off the floor. This wasn't just about calling out Starmer's policies. It was a roasting session on an international scale. But the big question is, why now? What did Starmer say to poke the Russian bear? And more importantly, what does this explosive exchange mean for Britain's foreign policy moving forward? Since Starmer became Prime Minister, we have seen that he isn't exactly known for being a quiet, behind-the-scenes type of leader. He likes to make waves, stir the pot, and put his foot down in ways that make international headlines.
One message, which is that we must double down on our support for Ukraine. Tomorrow is day 1,000 of the conflict. That's 1,000 days of aggression from Russia and 1,000 days of sacrifice from Ukraine. So that is my clear message here. It's number one on my agenda. Obviously, I'm not going to get into operational details.
Recently, he decided to turn up the heat on Russia, making some rather bold statements about nuclear threats, military support for Ukraine, and the UK stance on global security. From the moment Starmer opened his mouth, Moscow was listening, and they didn't like what they heard. If there is one thing about Russia and Vladimir Putin, it is that they don't take kindly to threats, especially not from leaders they consider weak, inexperienced, and utterly misguided.
Because, Mr. Speaker, the demands we now have to make of Britain must come alongside a new foundation of security for working people. The tough choices that we made last week, they are not done. We must use the process of getting to 3% of our national income spent on defence to fundamentally rebuild British industry. Use our investment in military spending to create new jobs and apprenticeships in every part of the country. And that's why last night I announced a deal that perfectly symbolises the new era. A partnership with Ukraine that allows them to use £1.6 billion of UK export finance to buy 5,000 air defence missiles manufactured in Belfast. Mr. Speaker, that means UK jobs, UK skills, UK finance pulling together for our national interests.
Starmer, in their eyes, was checking all three boxes. So when he started throwing around tough guy talk about NATO nuclear deterrence and standing up to Russia, he might as well have been waving a red flag in front of a raging bull, and boy, did the bull charge. Ian Popoff didn't just respond to Starmer's remarks, he obliterated them with the confidence of a man who knew he had the upper hand. Popoff took to Russian state television and delivered a message so fierce, so cutting, that you could almost hear the sound of diplomatic relations crumbling in real time. According to Popoff, Starmer's posturing wasn't just foolish, it was suicidal. Britain, he argued, had no business making threats against a nuclear superpower, and the idea that the UK could intimidate Russia was laughable. With each passing sentence, Popoff's words became sharper, his tone more dismissive.
Just had a very good meeting with President Zelensky where I made it absolutely clear that as far as the UK is concerned, the change of government makes no difference to the support that we will provide. We've been united on this when we were in opposition, and it was really important to me to be able to affirm that face-to-face in the meeting. I did speak to him immediately after I was sworn in as Prime Minister last week. And so we build on that here at NATO at this important summit because it is an opportunity for our Labour government to reaffirm our commitment to NATO. We obviously signed the original treaty.
He painted Starmer as a leader who was out of his depth, out of touch, and utterly outmatched in the high-stakes game of global power. And then came the dagger. Popoff, with a smirk that could freeze the temperature, issued a warning so blunt that even the most seasoned political analyst had to sit up straight. If Britain so much as thought about escalating tensions further, Russia would not hesitate to respond with force, not diplomatic pressure, not economic sanctions. That are being done by the administration, Popoff said. So what happens next? Is this just political theatre, or is Britain now firmly in Russia's crosshairs? The truth lies somewhere in between. You remember that a few weeks ago when Starmer visited the White House, Donald asked him, "Can you take on Russia by yourself?" That question was a loaded one, as it exposed Starmer's weakness in the eyes of his political counterparts in other countries. It was also an indication that he wasn't as respected as he thought on the global stage. Also, Starmer's approach to Russia has already started raising eyebrows. Unlike his predecessor, who had a more cautious stance, Starmer seems determined to take a hardline approach, perhaps too hardline, and his rhetoric, while bold, has left Britain in a precarious position. On one hand, he wants to appear strong and unwavering, but on the other, he's now caught in a dangerous game with a country that doesn't play by Western rules. But the biggest problem is that Russia does not bluff.
Can the UK play a role as a bridge between the US and the EU?
I think what the US wants to achieve is lasting peace in Ukraine that aligns precisely with what we want in the United Kingdom, what Ukraine wants and what our European allies want. What we now need to do is to make sure that we work together on a plan that can get us to that point, and that's why it's really important, I think, to focus first on the immediate questions in Ukraine.
Keir Starmer was the leader who was supposed to restore Britain's global standing, but he has instead become an international punchline. His attempts at foreign policy have been nothing short of catastrophic. Russia, a nation with a long history of political chess moves, wasted no time in exposing its blunders on live television. The moment he thought he could talk tough, Moscow responded with cold, hard threats, and not just any threats that put Britain directly in the crosshairs of a nuclear-armed adversary.
Cheers on the street outside You have full backing across the United Kingdom, and we stand with you, with Ukraine, for as long as it may take. And I hope you've heard some of that cheering in the street. That is the people of the United Kingdom coming out to demonstrate.
Keir Starmer's so-called strategy of aligning himself with aggressive rhetoric has done nothing but invite backlash. His government's stance on Ukraine, combined with the usual Western chest-thumping, has painted the United Kingdom as a willing participant in escalating tensions rather than a rational diplomatic force. The Kremlin saw through it immediately, and the reaction was swift, brutal and unfiltered. Russian officials took to state television essentially laughing at Britain's attempts to flex its muscle. In their eyes, Starmer was just another Western leader making empty threats, and to make matters worse, even Britain's allies were unsure of his approach. The Labour government may talk a big game, but its credibility in the eyes of global powers is crumbling. For instance, the French have their own agenda, the Americans are too caught up in their own economic challenges and immigration problems, and the rest of Europe is busy dealing with economic fallout. So Starmer is left in the middle of it all, awkwardly trying to command attention while being ignored by the very nations he needs support from at this time.
The problem is that the UK has started to name Russia as a threat, that as a major threat, as an immediate threat, very many times in every governmental document. What do you think? Of course it provokes a reaction, certainly. If you are calling us a threat, an enemy, an adversary and all that stuff, it is causing a reaction on the opposite side. Our people is reading very attentively newspapers from the United Kingdom, then political studies of the United Kingdom. They know English, by the way.
But do you deny that Russia is a threat to the United Kingdom?
Russia is not a threat. It is initially, we have had very good cooperation in 90s, first part of the 2000s. It was very good cooperation. Then United Kingdom, by some miracle to me, they start to believe that we are threatening to it.
We know Russia's reputation as a country that, when backed into a corner, has historically chosen action over words. And by publicly antagonizing Moscow, Starmer may have just triggered a reaction he isn't prepared to handle. If Starmer was hoping to gain international respect, he may have just achieved the opposite.
Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend the awful conflict in Ukraine is not the immediate spark of the cost of living crisis.
Instead of looking like a strong and decisive leader, he now appears as someone who has overplayed his hand. His strategy to talk tough, project power, and align closely with NATO may sound good on paper, but in reality it's a dangerous tightrope, because here's the harsh truth. Britain is not in a position to dictate terms to Russia.
Знаете, мы не вторгались в Украину. Мы объявили специальную военную операцию, когда у нас уже не осталось никакого способа объяснить Западу, что он занимается преступной деятельностью, втягивая Украину в НАТО.
Послушайте, что говорит Верховный комиссар ООН по правам человека. Она недавно, в мае выступала, да? Она сказала, в селе Ягодное, Черниговской области, российской военной 28 дней удерживали 360 человек.
Russia, for all its economic struggles, remains a military powerhouse with a vast arsenal, global alliances and a deep-rooted defiance against Western pressure. Meanwhile, Britain's military capabilities are stretched thin, its economy is facing turbulence, and its political landscape is far from stable, which raises the million-dollar question, is Keir Starmer ready for this fight, or did he just bite off more than he can chew?
How is it possible the Navy chases a Russian spy ship out of our waters, monitors it, watches it leave, but can't manage to stop an odd dinghy coming across?
An extremely good question. My own view is that the only way you will stop these boats coming across is to take much firmer action, and that means turning the boats back to France, whence they came. Of course, the lawyers will say, oh, it's international water, so you can't do it, you can't do it. We face an existential threat in this country.
Overall, Russia has made its stance crystal clear. They will not back down and won't tolerate threats, and they are fully prepared to escalate if necessary. The question now is, will Starmer double down or will he backtrack? If he chooses to stand firm, Britain could find itself facing increased hostilities, heightened tensions, and potentially even military consequences. But if he retreats, he risks looking weak, not just to Russia, but to his allies. Either way, this moment could define Starmer's leadership on the global stage. If you enjoyed this political firestorm, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating political content.